Geology, geology, geology. Today, we are in conversation with the exceptional case of Nick Isles and Caroline Isles. Yes, wife and husband, both extraordinary geologists living in Canada. Nick, professor at the University of Toronto, Scarborough, and Caroline, professor at McMaster University, both glacial sedimentologists, and both with a passion for communicating and explaining geoscience to the public, which is what I like to do here in Mini Geology. And that is the main reason we have them in here in Mini Geology talking to all of you. So thank you very much, Nick and Caroline. And so I think that is such a unique moment, for me at least, to have two extraordinary geologists together. That, by the way, they are wife and husband. So I would like to ask you some questions. Caroline, can you briefly describe Nick professionally?
That's kind of impossible. Can I describe Nick? Well, he's extremely passionate about geology. I can tell you that, and it basically is the tick of his life. It keeps him going. It winds him up, and it keeps him moving. What else can I say about him? He's a great communicator too, in terms of I think Nick has made huge strides in actually doing what we're saying we should be doing, is communicating the importance of geoscience to the public and all of the public. So he's done great works in some of the books that he's created, and the fact that Nick's always keen to go out in the field and talk to people, give talks that are aimed to a different audience than necessarily an academic audience. So I think that's one of the things that I can say who Nick is. He's been very good at doing that.
Nick,
I won't go any further.
Can you briefly describe Caroline?
Well, Caroline's my rock, and I can best describe her by telling you about how we met. I was finishing my PhD in England. I was interested in glaciers, and I'd led a very monkish existence working on glaciers and writing up the results. And then we met, I think it was my last few weeks of doing my PhD. And Lynn was leading an expedition to Iceland and came to see me to get some advice on what Iceland is like. So we met, and then I said, what the hell? I always wanted to hitch across the States. Do you want to come with me? And she said yes. And that was, we did a lot of geology and we got to know each other. And so that was our beginning. But we've tried to do things together. Even, you know, when we were raising kids, we had sabbaticals abroad. We always took the kids. And in many ways, it's been easier for both of us because, you know, it's difficult in marriages where one is a geologist and one isn't. And so all our holiday, well, we don't have holidays. It's all field work, research related field work. We drag the kids along, and so we're joined at the hip. And I bounce my ideas off Caroline and vice versa, and she's the first person that I go to, and whose advice I perhaps treasure more than anybody else's. So she's my rock.
Are you a couple that really looks like each other, or they are completely different? Like me and my wife were like North Pole, South Pole, completely different. If I like the solid soaps, she likes the liquid soap. I like, you know, completely different. So what about you?
We have quite a few differences, but there's quite a few similarities too. We both like the same kind of living environment and so forth, but he's a beer drinker, I'm a wine drinker.
I like motorcycles, she hates them.
Yeah, So there are certain things that we don't like. We each have our preferences, but generally speaking, we have more or less the same kind of aims and objectives. We both love traveling. We both enjoy our family. We both enjoy the outdoors. So yeah, we've got a lot of similarities.
I think we both realize that life is short. It's a big planet, and there's a lot to explore. And I think I think we pass that sense of inquiry onto our kids, and it's what we try and do with students. That, you know, you put them in landscapes. Well, how did this landscape come to be? And they do say years later, well, I can't drive past a rock now without wondering how old it is and how it got there. And you think, well, that's great.
What are the problems in your family, the ones related to your profession? You have, like, you are both of you very high in your profession, probably at the apex right now. What are the problems you have in your family related to your profession?
Actually, I think we've been very fortunate with our professions.
Yeah.
In that,
yeah,
our profession is very self-driven, so it's reliant on yourself to actually push yourself to do what you need to do. So we don't have anybody telling us what we have to do. We're both we're both self-reliant. So I think we've been very fortunate in that. We've been very fortunate in being able to determine what we do with our time and when we do it. So I think one of our downfalls is we tend to work too much. We spend a lot of time in the study here working, but it's because we both feel that this is the time we can spend on work. We do take time off when we need to. But I think in terms of our profession, we've both been very fortunate in being able to have a lot of freedom in being able to self-direct how we want to take our careers. And I think that's been a positive move for both of us.
You have a son and a daughter, right?
Yes.
What do they think about geology?
It's an interesting one. Now, our daughter is much more amenable to our discipline area. She actually came to McMaster University and has a degree in geography and environmental science. So she came on field trips with us. She's done a lot of work, and she's actually now working in the environmental area for a company. Our son didn't want anything to do with geology. After he'd been used as scale on so many geological photographs, he said, nope, I'm not interested in this at all. So he's now in the construction business, and is actually he has said he is a little bit interested now because he's asked us about some of the foundation materials that he's investigating for buildings. So it's actually coming around, and he's realizing that maybe his fuddy-duddy old parents may have some importance after all. So,
but he's involved as a project manager on what will be Canada's tallest condominium. And so it has a very deep foundation. So they've gone all the way down to bedrock. They've gone through very complicated glacial sediments. They've had problems with drainage. And so he's actually had to read consultants' reports. And we've had some discussions about the geology.
Nick, Caroline, what do you teach to your son and daughter?
What do we teach them? I think we've taught them always just to be very open to what they love doing themselves. I mean, it's something that we've always said is the way to be successful is to do the things that you love doing and you get most satisfaction from. We've never pushed them in any one direction. We've kept doors open, and I think in both of them, we've instilled a love of travel. And they have moved around a lot with us. Certainly a respect for the planet is something that we have instilled in them, but yeah, I think that's about.
I think just something as simple as work ethics too, you know.
What do you mean by that?
Put the time in, be professional. it's difficult to label it, but I think it comes down to that actually. And as Lynn said, always do something that you find interesting rather than something that's going to pay you a lot of money, but you're going to get bored with it one day. And that's the message we tell our students too, that you're going to be in this game a long time. And, you know, you need to be interested and passionate about what you do to carry you through, you know, the bad times, the low times in your career and all that sort of stuff. And not necessarily go for the status jobs or what your parents want you to do or what your peers want you to do. So I think, yeah, we've been hands off with them. And our parents were the same, actually. When we look back at our childhoods, our parents were very, very liberal and were hands off.
You have talking about your children and students. You have a lot of students, and you are inspired by them. When I listen to you, I read your articles. You certainly care about them, and they admire you. So that is clear to me reading your case. What is the difference teaching students that you love so much and teaching your own kids that you love even more?
There's not much difference, actually.
No.
When I come to think of it, I mean, my students, they think of me as the kind of mother figure in the lab group and the group of students that I work with now, because I kind of treat them the same way. You encourage them. You pull them up when you think they're not doing as much as they should be doing. You're there for support. Advice, and I think I treat my students very much in a similar way to the way I treat my kids. There's not very much difference.
You know, you go through various career stages, and it's interesting being an older member of the profession, because I've heard that the students like to talk to somebody who's older and learn from experience. So I really enjoy trying to distill what we've learned and you know, what we've unlearned as well to students to give them some guidance. We both get a kick out of that, because you feel useful. But we were heavily influenced in our early education by people, and I think we're just simply giving back. You know, we're trying to help the modern generation in the same way that people helped us.
And I think that far more important than any publications that we've written.
Absolutely.
It's not the publications. They'll be read by a handful. It's the students that we've had pass through our system. You know, they've come to courses, they've joined programs, they've talked to us. That's the important aspect of our jobs and our work, is the students that we've influenced on the way. And that's going back to some of your earlier conversation. That's the next generation. And they're the people that will carry on and move things forward, I think. And to think that we've had some kind of influence on their thinking, on their background, on their appreciation of the geosciences, I think that's the most important thing that either of us can think we've ever done.
Yeah, I think that's the essence. I think research is very competitive. It's dog eat dog. Papers come and go, they fade as they should. That's the scientific method. If things get out of date and the field moves on, whereas, you know, by books and talking to people, making documentaries and all the other stuff that we do, there is a lasting impact. You do affect people's lives, and we see that in the feedback that we get. We get emails saying, well, I read this and I liked it, and I went on a holiday with my kids and we did this. You know, we get feedback like that all the time, and that's really, it's makes it all worthwhile. Whereas the research it's fun. You're working with graduate students, that you're seeing them grow professionally, but the overall experience, it's a bit like mining, doing research. You're in an adit, whereas dealing with the public and students as a whole, you got a landscape approach. You know what I mean? It's a very different experience.
I know what you mean, and I'm thinking about you when you started your careers decades ago, and when you
Yes.
met, that you describe Nick meeting Caroline, or vice versa. And
Yeah.
I was thinking about if you could talk about your experience on the gender issue, because you are two professionals, male and the female, both geologists, and you travel the world. And I would like to know from your point of view, first, Caroline, maybe about the gender issue that is so important for us.
To be honest, I've been very fortunate in that all of the people that I've worked with have been, let's say, gender neutral. I've had very few experiences where I've actually felt that I have been discriminated against as a woman, as a female in what was originally a very male-dominated world. I think when we went to do field work in Spitsbergen, I was the only woman amongst 17 guys who were doing field work. But I never felt that there was any discrimination or any, there was no difference in the way I was treated in that way. There are just only a handful of occasions when I can say that I was not treated equally, let's say, to Nick.
Yeah.
And there was a couple of instances when I was doing I just finished my master's degree and I was presenting work on it. And a colleague would only direct questions to Nick, wouldn't ask me anything. But very few occasions. I think probably the worst experience I had was when we worked in Australia the first time, and this was in 1986. And also a little bit later than that, in the 90s. And some of the geoscientists there would not take me in the field, would not talk to me directly. They pass everything through Nick. And I found that coming from Canada and going to Australia at that time, and actually this was in the late 1990s. I found it very, very off-putting and concerning. But in my home university and throughout the work I've done here in Canada, I don't think I've felt any discrimination. And I've been really encouraged by the number of women who are now coming into the geosciences. We have probably more women students and graduate students in the program than we do have men. And I think this is a wonderful thing to see, that we're encouraging more and more women to go into the field. So, yeah.
Nick, how did you feel when you were acting as a filter to talk, to send messages to Caroline?
I understood the context because we're in a place where field work was tough. We even went through the same thing here in Canada many decades ago, and it was dangerous work. People lost their lives in the bush, and it wasn't seen as suitable employment for young ladies. That's all changed. So things have moved on a lot since then, and I think both of us are completely gender blind. It's, we've got some fantastic students from all cultures, from all genders. It's irrelevant. I know some people would criticize that, say, well, you got to notice it nowadays, but we don't. It's we treat everybody equally on their merits and their ability to generate ideas, to get involved. And it's all about passion. If they're passionate about what they do, we want to work with them,
I wonder, Nick, if you think you were fortunate or more lucky than Caroline in your career.
Yeah, absolutely. Caroline has two careers. I only have one. I have a professional career, and Caroline has a career as a homemaker and, raised our kids. I also, but my role was much less. So yeah, I've been very fortunate in that respect.
But I think it worked both ways too, because even though I was working and raising the kids, Nick was always there to be able to. So we definitely traded off raising the children between us. So I think it worked well for both of us. It was, I don't think either one of us has been particularly benefiting from it. I think we both have benefited from it because we've been able to understand, you know, those times when you just have to just sit down and work and get things done, and you know everything else has to get left. So we'd step in for each other when that needed to happen.
And our kids too were big into sports. So my son was a big ice hockey player, and I used to spend a lot of time with him, driving him around. I mean, I had a car, I think we put on 400,000 kilometers. It drove itself all over Ontario. It didn't need me. And Caroline was involved in our daughter. She was into volleyball. So we you know, between us, we spent a lot of time with our kids. And in fact, you know, our kids, the acid test is whether your kids, when they've left home, want to come and visit you. And we're very fortunate in that respect, that they enjoy our company and we love their company. And they've got two dogs. We used to have huskies, and we don't anymore because for a variety of reasons. And we get a great kick out of our kids and their dogs, you know.
So Nick and Caroline, it seems that you have a clear balance in your couple, both personally and professionally. Yeah. Is that something that you talked about in the past, or is something that came out naturally?
It just happened. It's just the way we worked. We worked together when, before we had the kids, we did lots of field work. We did all of our field work together. And even after we had the kids, it's just something that evolved. Wasn't ever talked about, or we just did it.
But, you know, the older you get, you become interested in legacy and what are you going to leave behind you? And, you know, your discussion about research versus outreach, I think the older I get, I think the outreach component is becoming more and more important, touching people, the new generation and all that sort of stuff. I think that's more important than the research side of it. I mean, we both enjoy good, successful research careers. We have graduate students, we have good funding, but I think on a big picture, it's the new generation, like we talked right at the beginning of the interview. It's leaving a legacy of people that will carry on the flame, and it may be flickering right now. You know, geology, I don't think the flame will go out, but if you can't do that, then there'll be no future of geology. So I think that's every geologist should talk to somebody and try and influence them. So that's our view as we age.
And you, Nick, and Caroline, both of you received several awards. And have you ever been really moved and touched by any of these awards received?
I think the award that I'm most proud of is my 3M Teaching Award, because I was recognized on a national level as an educator.
Yeah.
And I think that mattered most to me because, again, a lot of my teaching is not just to geoscientists, but it's to students who've never come across earth sciences before. And I get them interested, involved, and actually so many of them I've converted into geoscientists. I've kind of polluted their minds and converted them. And I think that recognition meant the most to me. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's awards I've got for outreach, not research. It's the outreach, the reaching out to the public. We did a documentary series with Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, and I think the total audience is still, it's 10 years old now and it's still being replayed. And I think total audience to date is about more than 70 million. And we had better ratings when it was shown than the news. Mind you, it's a lot of bad news, so that's not entirely unexpected, but it's the outreach again, the new generation. And geology really is an easy sell. Why aren't we better at it? Because it's so exciting. I mean, there's plates bouncing around, crashing into each other. There's ancient organisms. You know, there's mountains being raised and lowered. I mean, it's an easy sell. The material sells itself. So I think we should be doing a better job.
We didn't study marketing, huh? So Nick, what was the most beautiful compliment that you have received?
I could tell you a story. A graduate student and I were exploring a quarry. We were looking for evidence of ancient earthquakes, and we saw these disturbed layers in the walls of the quarry. So we spent some time there, and we were taken around by the quarry manager, and he didn't really know us and we didn't know him. And he said, "Oh, you're geologists?" We said, "Yes." He said, "Oh, I'm watching this amazing TV series at the moment. It's on CBC. That's you, isn't it?" And, you know, I thought, wow, that's great. Here's a quarry manager. He doesn't know me from Adam, but he's clearly excited about this stuff. And that to me, and that's happened several times, actually. I think that's demonstration of the value of what we're doing. You know, the people get the message and it sticks. And it's like, you've got them hooked. They're like fish. It's very biblical, actually. You've got them hooked, and their lives are changed because you give them that perception of a world that's always changing. And I think that is a fertile ground for then the importance of geology to society, to the well-being of society. I think, but you have to have that groundwork first. But you know, that's my story.
Caroline?
The biggest compliment? I don't know. I think the compliments that I feel are important right now that I do get are just the odd notes from students that come back and they say, "Thank you, this was wonderful. You know, you've opened my mind. I never knew what earth science was till this year, and you told me something about earth science. I now am excited about it and I want to learn more." That is what makes a difference in my life. I
can tell you about Caroline. It's when you go to graduation and the parents of the students come up to her and compliment her for influencing their sons and daughters. And that's pretty impressive. She makes a huge impression on people on a very personal level too.
Yeah, that's what I like doing. That's what makes me tick, I guess. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Caroline, let me here do a crossfire in here. Let us know, according to your knowledge, what was a project that Nick failed?
A project that he failed.
That's a long answer.
House maintenance, I'd say, is not his strong point. He's getting a bit better. He's just done a pathway recently, which was really good. Useless at cooking. I will not allow him anywhere near the kitchen. He's got worse over the years.
Nick, what do you think about you? Any failed project, maybe professionally, that you want to share?
I mean, any professional will have failures. You spend 6 months looking at something and it never works out. You even do field work. You know, we've got unfinished field work in various parts of the world that will never get finished because either the relevance of the project or the outcome seems, you know, uncertain. So yeah, absolutely.
When is the point that you take the decision to move on?
usually at 3 o'clock in the morning when you're in bed and you wake up, you think, no, it ain't going to work. You know, it's quite common actually. I mean, that's hypothesis testing. That's what scientists do. And some are going to work out and be successful.
How do you try to avoid that kind of failure, if we want to call it?
I don't think you can. I think it's part of the process. Yeah. And if you're not doing it, that's worse. Yeah. It's rejection of ideas.
You've got to try things out. Sometimes they just fizzle away. You know, they kind of, they just get less and less and less important. And so you think, well, yeah, maybe I shouldn't be following that. And sometimes you have to say, okay, we're going to turn around and you've got to stop it. But you have to have that, I think, otherwise you're not a true scientist.
Did it happen to you too, Caroline?
Oh yeah, there's lots of little things that you can think of. I can't think of one big particular project that sticks to mind, but there's all sorts of pathways that we've kind of looked at before that you kind of go, well, that could be interesting, but then no, maybe not so much. But you've got to be willing to try it, you know, see what it's like, see what happens.
Yeah, and it's a process of discovery, and some of the ideas you have come in weird moments, you know. You might be out walking, but I think the key is to get out in the field. That's our lab, really, where we generate a lot of our ideas. And it's just being inquisitive about how that particular piece of the planet evolved. But if you're making discoveries at the same time, you have to go up dead ends. All explorers do. They end up dead ends and have to turn around. And lots of places on the planet are named after dead ends. So it should be a natural process, and you shouldn't feel bad about it or you're failing.
Well, most of the times the explorers, they don't find anything, but it happens to me that you always feel bad. You don't.
Well, yeah.
You don't feel very good.
Depends on how much money and time and effort you've spent. You know, you're working with students and people of different ability and you know, passion, and sometimes things don't work out. That's why it's interesting working with students too. You really got to find the right person for the right project. And
how do you do that? Like, how do you choose? What are your parameters to choose a good project and couple it with a good student, an appropriate student?
One of the things that I've always found is you've got to listen to your students, and it's not just your project, it's your students' project too. So you've got to realize there's a huge reward by tapping into their expertise that may not be yours. So I've had some fabulous students in the past that have been excelling in areas that I cannot, but together we can really produce a rich product. Neither one of us separately could do that, but together we can. So I think in terms of being a supervisor of research, you have to listen to your students and you have to be aware of what their interests are, where their passions lie. Because if you can tap into their passions and their expertise, you're on a winner. So it's actually learning and listening to your students as much as anything.
And that's the fuel that keeps you going, really, because you get students that come out of nowhere and they are fantastic. Or you get students with lousy grades, but they do a small research project and you think, wow. They come in after the weekend and they ask questions and you can tell they've been thinking about it. And that it's like finding a gold nugget. You've been looking for 6 months and you find a gold nugget. And I think that's what keeps you going. And why retirement it's going to be tough because you don't have that stimulation of finding new brains and nurturing them. So that's one of the great pleasures of our job.
Talking about stimulation, sometimes we're stimulated by criticism, and actually the peer review is about criticizing the work. Nick, what was the hardest criticism that you have received?
Ooh, we've had a lot.
Oh, we've had a lot, and it still goes on. If you're a good scientist, you're upsetting somebody, not deliberately, but you know that's the scientific method. You're trying to winnow out poor hypotheses. So, yeah, we've had. Well, our first work was we spent a lot of time on around modern glaciers at a time when not much was known about them, and certainly how they move sediment and all that. So we used that knowledge. We came back to Canada, and we've got the record of a big ice sheet, many ice sheets in the past. And we came up with new interpretations, and they were deeply unpopular amongst the more traditional geologists. And so we're used to controversy. It's like being on stage. You get used to lousy reviews, but you know, it's all part of the process. But the science advances. You have to have debate. Otherwise, you know, if there's no debate, science is dead, and you don't want to be part of it. So,
and I think my advice is also persevere.
Yeah.
And there's some things that we were criticized deeply and heavily for ideas when we first came up with ideas about how to describe sediments in a different way. And everybody was going, no, you can't possibly do this. No, this is wrong. Now everybody uses kind of methodology of describing sediments, but it took 5-10 years for this to get into the system and for people to use it. But it was very hard at first when we were first getting this reaction from everybody else to our work. So you have to persevere, and you have to maintain belief in yourself and confidence in what you're doing, as long as you believe that it really is okay. And yeah, just be strong through that. But criticism is good. It keeps you on your toes. The peer review process is flawed in some ways. It's not perfect, but it certainly helps you question your own beliefs and say, well, why did I think that? And maybe I'm not explaining that particular element properly, or maybe I've missed something in that. So I think the peer review process is harsh and can be painful, but it ultimately is beneficial.
Caroline, you talk a lot about how you treat the students, what are the concepts behind your research. Do you have a role model that you look at that helps you in your profession, in your life?
Oh, I don't think I had a single role model. I think I was very fortunate in having Nick as a partner, that we could work on things together. And so in many ways, I think that partnership overcame the need for a role model. But I was very fortunate when I started at McMaster that I had senior colleagues who were very understanding of a young woman starting work with young children, which was very unusual at that time because there were very few women in geosciences, and I don't think anybody had children as a professor in a geoscience department when I did. They were very supportive, and even though they weren't direct role models, I would say they were incredibly important in that growth of me as a professional, because they were supportive and helped when I just needed somebody to say, yes, you're doing the right thing. So I didn't have a single role model.
You, Nick?
I have several, actually. I was at school in London, you know, in the urban jungle, and I was about 16 at the time. I didn't know what I wanted to do. And we had a new teacher arrive at the school, and he was a geologist, brand new degree from Leicester University. And we went on weekend field trips, and I just loved it. And he changed my life, there's no doubt about that. And then I did graduate work with a guy called Roger Slatt, who you will know. and a guy called Bob Rogerson. And Roger taught me, I think, how to think and write, and Bob just got me excited about science. And I still think back about those two and the experience at school as role models.
Nick and Caroline, you both tell stories. We all do. But you do it particularly well. So now, what would you say to the listeners? What are the key ingredients of your stories? What are the main actions to mix the ingredients? How do you cook them to have a good story so that everybody that writes a technical paper can change methodology and tell the story differently?
You have to be aware of your audience, I think. Think about the people that you're talking to. And so the stories change according to who you're speaking to and who you're trying to communicate with. So a story would be different if I was teaching a group of first-year students to teaching maybe a group of graduate students or going out to the public. You just add different nuances to the story to make it relevant to their lives and their situations. And I think storytelling is the most important part of teaching, actually. It's packaging information in a parcel that it has a beginning, a center, and an end. And it seems relevant to the person that you're talking to. So I think storytelling is probably the most important element of what we do. We do it in different ways. Our research papers are different stories and they're written in a technical way, but then you have to translate that into a language that students will understand. So you are translating and making a different story, or you're telling maybe the same story, but in a different way when you're communicating that with students.
Yeah.
Or the public.
Yeah, it's science by stealth. Because in a big undergraduate class, if you tell stories about where you went, what you were doing, who you met with, all the incidents that happened to you, all the near accidents and all that stuff, they get interested and they absorb the science. They don't realize they're doing it, but they do. And then when it comes to writing technical research papers, it's getting tougher because it seems so dry. You never see your audience. So I'm finding it personally more and more difficult to address research.
To be motivated.
Actually, you have a very eclectic careers, even if as a couple, you are both glacial sedimentologists, right? Not only sedimentologists, but a specific facet of the sedimentologist, but then together like a unique organism. Instead, I think that you are very eclectic. And so you go from the very technical, high-ranked scientific publications to the books, to the general research, funding the money, comparing and contrasting modern and ancient systems, the public outreach, looking, as you said, to the right student for the right project, trying to involve the local communities impacted by the urban sediments a lot. You can read a lot of that. So how do you handle your career? How can you explain to the others when is the right moment to do what?
That's a good question.
Take up opportunities when they arise. That's what I think we've always done. We've things have arisen. There's been an opportunity. For example, we were offered the opportunity to go to Brazil to do some work with Petrobras. So rather than saying, well, we'll think about it, said, yeah, we'll go. And so you take that opportunity, but that leads to other opportunities. And so it's almost like a chain reaction. Things happen one after the other. So I don't ever think that we've really controlled our careers. I think we've been able to respond to stimuli that have appeared at different times. And sometimes those stimuli are students. So maybe a student comes across our doorstep with a particular set of skills And so our research tends to move in that direction for a little while. So I think it's being open to opportunities and to be willing to follow pathways that maybe you haven't followed before. And that's what I think makes it, there's a richness to being able to do that, because you're never focused in one particular niche. You can move around, but I'd say it hasn't been managed, it's been opportunistic.
So I think it's the opportunities may be narrowing in the profession. People want to know what the outcomes are, and you very often you just don't know. It's that, you know, testing ideas that we talked about earlier on. Some are going to work, some aren't. You get the right student for the right project, or you don't. So I think it's becoming a little bit more difficult. I think we enjoyed a lot of freedom. At a time when geology was important. It goes back to that, you know.
But I think the importance of geology now is it's kind of, I think it's spreading, it's widening.
Morphing.
It is morphing, and particularly in all kind of environmental areas. So it could be from, you know, anything from contamination to landslides to earthquakes, whatever. I think it's that, how does geology impact society is the main way we should be thinking of moving forward, because that's how students are going to get engaged. That's how the public, and that's how maybe we'll influence governments at some time, by taking that strong attack of geology and society.
Yeah, I'd love to write a book called Why Geology Matters, where you sort of spell out for the guy next door or the guy on the bus or whatever, why it's important that our society would fold overnight if it wasn't for somebody out in the bush looking for minerals and then developing.
So are you writing this book?
I want to.
It's a retirement project.
Okay. Call us when you need something. We're going to feed you. And we're almost at the top of the hour of the recording. I would like to ask you another couple of personal things. Nick, what are you afraid of?
Running out of ideas, waking up in the morning, not being inquisitive about what's happening in the bigger world geologically, not wanting to travel. You know, that's what I fear.
You, Caroline?
I don't know, not being able to do what I want to do, I think.
Another pandemic.
I wouldn't like a pandemic, because it's been very hard not having to be able to be face to face with our students and to be so remote from our students. That's been a hardship this past year.
And what are you proud of?
I'm very proud of our family. Our kids. I'm very proud of, I think our whole careers have been something that I feel proud of. I do. I think we've had an impact where I think it's counted. We've enjoyed it on the way, and it's never felt like a struggle. It's been fun. So I'm very proud of the kind of educational impact we've been able to have on a large number of students, a large number of people.
Nick, what are you proud of?
Yeah, I think it's engaging students through field work, seeing the responses of students when they're placed in an environment which they're not used to, and the sort of feedback that you get many years later, that the experience they had on a field camp made them turn them into geologists. You know, I think, wow, that's as good as it gets. You know, forget all the papers you published, all the books you've written. It's that the next generation that you've had some sort of impact. So that's what I'm proud of.
Any regrets?
Life's too short.
No, I don't have any regrets. I don't think I would have done anything different. I've always kind of taken the approach to life that, no, you should live it without any regrets, and take opportunities when you can and enjoy the journey.
We all have dreams. So what is your dream?
Dream. Ooh, to be able to travel again.
Yes.
To be able to hug my kids, hug my students, go freely around anywhere without any restrictions. Yeah, my dream is to be free again without any of these COVID restrictions. But yeah, hopefully that will be soon.
Yeah, my dream is for the US border to open. I like motorcycling. I like going on long trips, particularly down into the American Southwest. I love that area. I love the history. I love the geology. And to me, that's part of my life that's cut out right now. So my dream is that I can go back there and explore that on a motorcycle again.
Well, we will wait for you in here in this area of the map. Come to the Southwest. We're going to meet there and talk more about geology.
Absolutely. We'll make a date.
And so now you have an open mic, as I promised before, Nick and Caroline. The audience is yours, listening to you, and the mic is yours as well.
For everybody out there, I think for those who are in the position of being educators, listen to your students, be interested in them, sharing their passions, listen to their interests, their objectives, and support them. They're our future. And for students, follow your heart, follow what you love, be passionate. Don't be afraid of stepping into new things. Every opportunity has its own rewards. There may not always be opportunities that will be incredibly successful, but you will learn from them regardless. And I think being open to opportunity is a wonderful thing and can take you a long way.
Yeah, I would simply emphasize what I said before. I think life is short. There's a big world out there to explore, and then you add the previous worlds down with geologic time, and take the opportunity to travel, understand how that place came to be, and you will find your life has changed. And if you can take one person with you and change their life, and so on, I think that's as good as it gets. And never lose sight of the fact that you've got this opportunity. You just happen to be alive on a dynamic planet. Think about the chances against that. It's incredible. So I think take that opportunity and travel. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Nick. Thank you very much, Caroline. Today, we are in conversation with the exceptional case of Nick Iles and Caroline Iles. Yes, wife and husband, both extraordinary geologists living in Canada. Nick, professor at the University of Toronto, Scarborough, and Caroline, professor at McMaster University. Both glacial sedimentologists and both with a passion for communicating and explaining geoscience to the public, which is what I like to do here in Mini Geology. And that is the main reason we have them in here in Mini Geology talking to all of you. So thank you very much, Nick and Caroline.
Thank you, Daniel, and keep up the good work that you're doing. You're doing a fantastic job. Thank you.
Thank you.